The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
And what's happening, friends? It is Fantasy NBA Today, the hoop-ball.com podcast. I'm Dan Vespers, he's Vince Miracle, and I'm not goofing around today. We're jumping right into the mix because, Vince, this is one of those very odd and rare times where, just due to scheduling, you and I are doing podcasts on back-to-back days. It feels
back-to-back.
Yeah, it feels a little bit strange. I don't feel like I need to ask you how you've been because, frankly, I know, unless something crazy happened this morning. Did something crazy happen this morning?
Something crazy happened right before you called me before we did this show.
No,
man.
it didn't. What was it?
Yeah. I just saw the San Diego Comic-Con final trailer for, guess what? Suicide Squad. And guess what, guys? I'm going to the premiere on August 5th. You should too. That movie looks amazing.
All right, well, that was something, I guess. Okay, I'm glad I asked. Thank you for keeping me in line. On our last show, which actually was posted on Wednesday morning, we covered the Southeast Division on the Eastern Conference, which is the first of the three that we're going over. If you want to, by the way, go back and listen to our breakdown of all three Western Conference divisions, I should say, you can certainly do so. And before we dig into the meat of it, I lied. Vince, I'm putting you up here, stepping you up to the plate once more. How can listeners go back and listen to old shows, and how can they make sure they catch all future programming?
Well, if you guys want to listen to this show, all previous shows or upcoming shows, be sure to subscribe to this show on iTunes. And if you do have an Android phone and you can't get to an iTunes, well, guess what? There's actually a pod in your app store. Download the app, Double Pod. You'll see the little iTunes symbol for the iTunes little symbol thing that they normally have on an iPhone. Click on that, download it, and you can listen to all our shows from your Android device. And if you still don't want to do all that because that's too much work and iPhone users don't want to type that all in, go on YouTube and just look up the Hoop Ball account, look for the logo, and subscribe there.
Not bad indeed. Vince, I like to ramp up our assessment of the different divisions. And when I say ramp up, I don't necessarily mean that we start with the worst team and make our way towards the best. Generally, I like to start with either a team where there isn't a whole lot going on or a team that we've already covered. Now, you flipped a coin at the end of our last show, and that moved us to the Central Division for this particular program. And to me, this is outside of maybe, well, we could say the Bulls and the Pacers, because there have been some pretty big changes there. We covered the Bulls and the Pacers changes already, which means that this show is largely going to be looking at teams where not a ton changed, and then kind of rehashing the big alterations in Indiana and in Illinois. So it's not really the best move in broadcasting to go into a show and say, you might not learn anything from this program, but I don't know that we're going to be making a ton of startling revelations. That being said, let's start making our way through, and I'm betting something will turn up as we sort of start to roll over some rocks here. Let's start with the Cleveland Cavaliers, because to me that's an easy one. They won the championship last year. They're largely unchanged. They got Mike Dunleavy in the Chicago Bulls sell-off, and that's sort of it. In looking up and down the depth chart, at least, the Birdman, is that worth mentioning? Otherwise, I think you're going to see guys whose value is pretty similar to what you saw the last 2 months of this last season. So, Vince, tell me what I'm missing here.
Kyrie Irving's value is going to drop.
How come?
I'm just kidding. I'm completely kidding.
I was going to say that would have been a startling revelation, and I would have wanted to know why. So not a ton of changes. I mean, as Kyrie worked himself into shape last year, he became the guy that people drafted early. So with his health back, it seems like you could probably grab him in a similar spot this coming year. LeBron tailed off a little bit. He wasn't actually a true first-round guy despite the big numbers. But, I mean, you got two very, very, very reliable early-round guys on this team. You've got a Kevin Love. That's the question, I think, that people are going to be asking. And we talked ad nauseum about it, Vince, during the playoffs, that Kevin Love just didn't really fit when the games turned into that playoff atmosphere, when teams were able to focus on a one weakness with the team. And for the Cavs, at times it was Kevin Love's defense, and he was sort of the odd man out. But as you get back into the regular season, that becomes less of an issue. So where do you put Kevin Love in this next season? Is his role going to pretty much get eliminated? I see him coming back and being fantasy relevant during the regular season again.
Fantasy relevant for sure. Still not going to be the Kevin Love that most people are hoping that they're going to get. I mean, we harped on Kevin Love a lot through the playoffs, especially when we were doing the DFS stuff, and about how his defense was going to be a problem. And surprisingly enough, it was Kevin Love's defensive play on Stephen Curry, I believe, in Game 7.
Yep.
That won them that title.
Which is, by the way, can we also comment on the fact that there was really no reason why Steph Curry didn't just drive past him, other than that he got caught up in the moment in trying to do too much? But go on. Sorry, go ahead.
No, we talked about that next day, and he even admitted it at his press conference. He's like, I was searching for my shot, and you can tell during that Game 7 and even in Game 6, he was searching for a jump shot to start falling, and you have to applaud the Cavs defense for that. But back to Kevin Love, I mean, I agree with you. I think he's going to definitely be fantasy relevant. He was one of the league's top rebounders and can still be that type of player. I just think it's going to be hard for him to be that type of player with a guy like Tristan Thompson there, a guy like LeBron there who can rebound the basketball. So there's not going to be a lot of rebounds there for him to grab. He's still going to be the stretch four guy, though. I don't think they're going to run the offense through him like many are hoping they're going to do. I know there's some talks from some people that I'm hearing is that LeBron's going to kind of not necessarily take a backseat, but kind of hit cruise control through the season next year. Because, I mean, no matter the moves that gets made in the East this season during this offseason, I mean, the Cavs still have to be favorited by a lot. And they're the reason why they're the league champions right now. So
yeah. So my take on all of that is, I actually think that there's value with Kevin Love, and this is something that, and maybe I'll dive a little bit more into my own background on this show. I actually worked for the website pregame.com for a couple of years. It's a sports handicapping website where you kind of learned to look for the value, to look for the guy who has been getting clobbered, the guy who the general populace is less enamored with, and you scoop that guy up at just the right moment. Now, it's not easy to know when a guy's bottomed out. How do you find that key spot? And it was also kind of a lesson that my grandfather taught me as a young man about buying and selling stocks, where you don't chase it. You never chase something. When it's on the way down, you don't chase it to try to catch it on the way back up. We don't chase it when it's on its way back up because you've already sort of missed the boat. Now, that creates a conundrum where with Kevin Love, there is a possibility that he keeps going down. His value hasn't actually reached the bottom point, the floor of the ocean. I believe that it has. I believe that what you saw with Kevin Love in the learning curve, in the fact that they were trying to force feed him at times, was just not working. But all of that aside, and the playoff struggles aside, at the end of last year, in totals and averages, actually, it comes out oddly close to one another because he played about the league average number of games, Kevin Love was an early fourth-round value. I think that number is going to surprise a lot of people because they felt like he was drafted in the third round, most leagues. They probably felt like they were getting a disappointment because, well, frankly, he wasn't, like you said, Vince, the Kevin Love of yore. He only shot 42%. He doesn't do any stealing or blocking. He doesn't rebound the way he did in Minnesota. He doesn't score the way he did in Minnesota. But you know what he does do? Shoots free throws exceptionally well. Shoots the three ball well. Does get a decent number of rebounds. He can assist every little bit. And when you put all that together, low turnovers, he was a fourth-round guy. So to me, if you're expecting an early fourth-round value, and that's where you look to take him, that's a pretty good get. I think that a lot of people are going to pass on Kevin Love because they felt like he was worse than he was, and he's a guy that I wouldn't mind having on a team.
Okay, my response to that would be I may be the person that says, go ahead, take him in the fourth. I'm probably going to wait 2 more rounds or maybe even wait till the 5th round and get a guy like Ryan Anderson then. who's going to be doing almost the same exact thing as Kevin Love for the Rockets.
Now, what about durability? Does that not bother you at all?
Oh, it definitely bothers me. But I mean, if I'm banking on someone to just give me 3-pointers, decent percentages, and a handful of rebounds, and maybe a little bit over a handful of rebounds with an assist or two, I mean, I would wait around and probably get someone either at a wing position or at the point guard position that can do a little bit more of the other things that are harder to come by than draft a guy like Kevin Love. And that's my personal take on a guy like Kevin Love. It's not like I'm hating on him as an NBA player. I do think, like you said, I agreed with you. I do think he's going to have fantasy value. And you're right. He did end up, I believe, in the fourth round, like you said, after last year. So, yeah, I may be of the minority, but I would probably wait a round or two and see if I could snag a guy like Ryan Anderson, regardless of the risk.
See, I don't think you're in the minority. I think you actually fall into the majority there of people that saw this last year for Kevin Love and weren't particularly enamored with it, but now kind of breaking it down a little bit more. He ended up averaging 10 rebounds a game, 2.5 assists, almost a steal, half a block. That, by the way, surprised me. I don't remember him blocking any shots, but apparently he blocked about 40. He scored 16 points a game. That's a number that I think most people would have hoped would have been a little bit higher. But here's the number, to me, that might be the biggest of all, particularly, again, 9-cat Roto League. 77 ball games. That's a really good number. There's only 82 in a season. Missing 5 games is a lot of value. That's a guy that's getting in there, and even on a bad night, at least he's playing. And that, to me, is a reason why you may think about taking him not early. You know, if for people that drafted him in the third round last year, he was a disappointment. He was a round below where he was drafted. But I think that people are going to drop him a few rounds, and I think that he could be snatched up at a pretty good bargain. Otherwise, with this Cleveland team, Vince, I don't have any particularly strong thoughts. I don't really like what you get from Tristan Thompson from a fantasy standpoint, and that's what we're talking about here. I'm not all that concerned with the shooting guard, small forward cluster, depending on where bodies end up there. And then, of course, Kyrie Irving is a stud when he's healthy, so obviously he'll go pretty early. But that's my take on Cleveland.
What about J.R. Smith, though? Because he's one of those players that deals with consistency. He kind of has a problem with consistency. Like, one year you'll see him be really good, the next year you may see him go down. I mean, he was in a contract year. He still has not been re-signed with the Cavs, but all expectations are that he's going to be re-signing with the Cavs. Do you think he holds value? Can he be that consistent player, or are we going to probably see a Danny Green type of year, gets paid and then kind of has a slumpy year?
No, he's a late-round guy. I had him in a number of leagues last year. He ended up as a top 60 guy by averages, which I think will surprise a lot of people from this most recent season. He averaged 2.5 3-pointers per ball game and over a steal per game. So he's a guy that actually was sneaky productive. I got him very late in fantasy drafts in both leagues, and I held on to him for a really long time. Once I had sort of situated myself in the rotisserie league where I was pretty sure I was going to end up in the 3-pointers category, then he became less relevant. But he's a guy I had most of the year. I don't know that I would trust him in kind of a day-to-day issue. So weekly leagues, he actually becomes a little bit of a headache because he can disappear. DFS, at times, he becomes a headache because of the disappearing act. But if you kind of close your eyes and plug your nose with J.R. Smith, you're probably going to get, I would say, top 80 to 90 value out of the guy. So I wouldn't be too upset. If indeed, by the way, he does re-sign with Cleveland, that's where I would look to take him.
Okay. What team's next?
That was fun. I got to do a little bit of ranting there. All right, I'm turning it back over to you, Vince, because we've already talked about Chicago, so this is, again, a little bit of a rehashing. But now we're starting to dig into it a little bit, and I want to try to figure out really where these guys are going to get picked, because I already said the guy that I was targeting on the Chicago Bulls, and that man is Nikola Mirotic. I'm not backing off of that. He's the floor spacer big man that they have. He's the only one, and I think he's going to be a huge value this year. But this is a team that also has Rajon Rondo, a guy that you are quite familiar with, and he's going to have the ball in his hands, but it feels like, Vince, it can't possibly be as much with Jimmy Butler and Dwayne Wade beside him.
Well, Chicago fans, I've already done my rant. I'll just say have fun. That's where I'm going to leave it with Rajon Rondo. Just get ready to have a lot of fun. He can't have the ball in his hands at all times with Jimmy Butler and Dwayne Wade, though. I agree with that.
So would you dare call Rajon Rondo someone else's headache? It still feels like he's worth owning somewhere, right?
I'm stamping him with someone else's headache.
Wow, look at that. This is a guy who was a number 50, top 50 fantasy guy last year. Doing it, by the way, and Aaron Bruschi on the program back during the regular season made very clear, and you have as well, that he put up big numbers in sort of a losing mentality. That probably won't be tolerated in Chicago, but he's still a mega assist guy. So there's got to be a spot for that on some fantasy team, doesn't there?
There's definitely going to be a spot for it, and if he can keep up being the league leader in assists, I mean, applaud him for that. That my issue is something that we automatically started off with this team is he going to be able to have the ball in his hands as much as he really wants to with guys like Dwayne Wade, a guy like Jimmy Butler. You brought up the shooter and Nikola Mirotic. There's going to be other players with the ball in his hands, and what else can Rajon Rondo do other than pass? He's not a good defender. He takes risks defensively and tries to go after passing lanes, which is why he's able to get as many steals as he does. But he's not a good defender. He is not a good shooter. So other defenders are going to be sagging off of him on that end of the floor, which clogs the lane for guys like Jimmy Butler and Dwayne Wade. So what else is he going to be out there for? And that's where I kind of start seeing his value drop from what it once was. Honestly, I'm going to say he averages less than he's going to average less than 10 assists a game this upcoming season.
So he's a late round guy for you then, or not at all?
I mean, if I'm drafting a team, I mean, he's definitely going to be on the radar for most people because of the assist totals that he's going to be able to get you. Again, I've already stamped him with my reasons. I think as a fantasy player and you're looking at how this roster is constructed, I don't think he's going to be able to hold the value of what you saw with him in a Kings uniform and a Bulls uniform. So, no, I have him as someone else's headache. But, yeah, if I'm drafting him at all, it's going to be in the latter half of drafts.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Jimmy Butler. I think people are interested in where he fits in with this team because this was, and probably should still be, his team. He is the guy. He missed 15 games last year. He was what you'd kind of call a bookend pick for most fantasy drafts, end of the first round, beginning of the second round. And he ended up as sort of a mid to late third round value at the end of the year, partially due to missed games, but also partially because he didn't do as much as I think people figured that he would. Where does Jimmy Butler go in this draft? Is he still is he still a first round pick? Is he a second round pick? Is the third round now what people should expect from Jimmy Butler?
Early second round pick.
All right, so not much drop off year to year then for you. You feel like this coming season now with maybe better pieces around him could be what you might call a bounce back year.
I think this is going to be a big bounce back year for Jimmy Butler. I think Dwayne Wade honestly helps Jimmy Butler because they're going to have to respect him. I think that's on if they were going to make any move. I think if you take Rajon Rondo out of the mix, I think a Dwayne Wade Jimmy Butler combination really does work, and that's just my opinion. I think Dwayne Wade is an underrated passer, and maybe that's just my thoughts on it. I just don't see a lot of people always talking about how decent of a passer that he is, and so I actually think that'd be a pretty good fit. But again, I think Jimmy Butler is going to be the guy for this team, and he's still going to have the ball in his hands quite a bit. I mean, even Rajon Rondo, I mean, he's already saying the right thing, saying that this is Jimmy Butler's team. And so I think that Chicago knows that, and I think Fred Hoiberg knows that, and I think they're going to put the ball in his hands as much as possible. And, of course, the defensive stats are always nice.
So I'm looking at trying to get Nikola Mirotic in almost every league that I'm in, and I hope that anybody that I'm playing with is not listening to this particular podcast. I think that he's a guy that fits in beautifully because of what he can do. Dwayne Wade is not an outside shooter. Jimmy Butler's not really an outside shooter. Rajon Rondo, not an outside shooter. So the backcourt, even all the way through the wings on that Chicago team, the guys that are going to be playing the bulk of the minutes are going to be inside the three-point line. So they need anybody, to make sure that all 10 basketball players are not from the free throw line down, and that guy's going to have to be Nikola Mirotic. He hit 2 threes a ball game last year while only playing 25 minutes a game. And that, again, with better players around him now, he should get better looks. Listen to this, too, by the way, Vince. 2 3-pointers a game, 12 points, almost 6 boards, about a steal, almost a block a game, and only 1.5 turnovers. He didn't shoot the ball that well, only 41%. That's sort of the one piece that was holding him back. He also missed 16 games and ended as an early 7th-round value. I'm targeting him a round or two earlier than that, which I know sounds insane, but the ceiling is so high for this guy. I mean, if his shooting percentage comes back a little bit, if he gets himself some better open looks, he could easily, to me, put up top 40 numbers, and I'm looking to try to get him almost everywhere I'm playing.
I 100% agree with you. They need to have him on the floor, especially with the things that we've already brought up, with the fact that this team doesn't have the greatest shooters. And I think I brought this set up the day we did the Dwayne Wade podcast, that as a whole, Jimmy Butler, Rajon Rondo, and Dwayne Wade as a whole altogether scored 133 three-pointers combined.
Yeah, and Mirotic has more than that himself, I believe, from last year.
Oh, I can look that up right now.
Yeah, I'll check it up as we're talking. 135 for Mirotic last year. So, yeah, what is that, 2 more than what you said?
2 more than all 3 of those players combined.
Yeah, I'm loving all over Mirotic. He's my slobber monster for this episode.
Yeah, no, I think that if there's anyone that you really want to be having your eye on that's not Jimmy Butler, I think you have to have your circles around a guy like Nikola Mirotic. And you said he brought up 7th-round value. I'm really hoping that he can get this shot selection to be a little bit better, because at times he did force it. He tried to drive to the lane and make some crazy layups and get to the free throw line and things like that. And sometimes it just didn't work out for him. But at the same time, he's not going to have the ball in his hands as much, I think, for on the ball moves. So you got to get people off the dribble and things like that. I think he's going to be a catch and shoot guy. I think he's going to get it where he has it, gets a screen for maybe a Taj Gibson or a Robin Lopez, and he's going to be asked to hit that jumper or just make that layup. And I think that's perfect for him. I really do like Nikola Mirotic, and for a lot of the reasons that you said, he did more than just shoot 3-pointers and get points.
Yeah,
he did other things as well. My question to you, though, Dan, after you talked about your boy Nikola Mirotic, there's a guy that I'm looking at here that continues to be the potential 6th man for this Bulls team, but he wants to be a starter very badly, and his stats say that he deserves at least an opportunity over the years, and that's Taj Gibson.
Yeah, so the way I'm looking at this Bulls roster, and it's possible that maybe it's not quite so simple of a mathematical breakdown, but let's just say there are exactly 96 minutes between the center and the power forward position, and they're going to get split between X number of guys. It never quite works out that perfectly. Obviously, it needs to add up to 96 between the two positions, but you see smaller guys that shift up to the 4 for a couple of minutes. You see bigger guys that shift down to the 4, and so on and so forth. But if we conservatively say that of those 96 minutes at the big man spots, about 86 of them are probably going to fall between Mirotic, Gibson, and Lopez. And to me, that sort of makes all 3 of them fantasy relevant, just because I don't know where else they turn there. They have Cristiano Felicio is also a center on this roster, and Bobby Portis. Shouldn't leave him out, but that's sort of it. So you're talking about Mirotic, Gibson, Lopez. These are the guys that are going to be chewing up most of those minutes. And if Gibson is playing 28 minutes, he's going to be fantasy relevant. If Robin Lopez is playing 28 minutes, he's going to be fantasy relevant. And that's about the number that I think you might get from these guys. Maybe a couple less than that. But to me, they're late-round guys, but I would look at them. If they fall and if they're floating around towards the tail end of a draft, sure, take a flyer on those guys.
Yep, I completely agree. And I really actually like Robin Lopez, especially for the blocks that he can provide you.
And a great free throw shooter, by the way, at the center position. A very good free throw shooter.
Grabs, rebounds well, defends well, is free throw shooting well, decent percentages actually. I think it was 53%?
Yeah, solid percentages all the way around for both Lopez brothers. Robin was 54% from the field and 80% at the free throw line.
Those are nice to get from a center, especially at the end of your draft. So, of the two, I'm looking more at Robin Lopez than I am Taj Gibson because I look at Taj Gibson as more as just a scorer, especially at the age of 31. There, he's more of becoming a. This is going to probably be a hit on him, and I hope if he ever listens to this show, don't get kind of offended. But he's kind of turning into like a Carlos Boozer type player.
Oh, no. I don't think he's that good of a scorer, and I do think he's a better defender than Carlos Boozer is. He did average, by the way, 0.6 steals and 1.1 blocks per game last year. He was a top 130 guy, and that could come up just the tiniest bit. So,
what about
yeah.
Dougie McBuckets?
Don't
need
care.
Scoring, need threes.
Yeah, he'll see some time, but he's not worth drafting. You pick him up if you need to fill him in somewhere. Slot him in. That's my take on McBuckets.
Love that nickname.
Shall we move along to the Indiana Pacers then?
Let's chug along.
Okay, so this is an interesting one. We may end up spending a couple minutes with Indiana because we've already talked about the Jeff Teague thing and that there is a little bit of a how many shots to go around issue between the 1, 2, and the 3 spot on this club. But let's not forget now, Indiana also acquired Thad Young in the offseason. They also signed Al Jefferson to be sort of the big postman that if you want to shorten a game a little bit and run a half-court set for a few minutes and let everybody catch their breath, they've got Big Al. And Miles Turner, who really came on strong towards the end of last year. So there's a lot of interesting players on this Indiana team. The question is, where on God's green earth do they fall in a fantasy draft? And that, Vince, I still have some question marks with this team. I'm very curious, by the way. I'm going to let you take the lead with Indiana. I'm struggling with this one. I'll admit it. I have strong feelings about a lot of the teams in this conference, or in this division, I should say. But Indiana's one where I'm still kind of scratching my head a little bit.
Oh, I'm right there with you. I'm just looking over their roster right now, and it's just like, what style are they running? Are they going up and down with the potential to slow? I'm with you, Dan. I'm scratching my head with a lot of it. I think the only thing that is 100% guaranteed is that I want to draft Paul George.
Well, he turned out to be pretty darn good again, didn't he?
He did. He very much did so. He was a steal for anybody who got him in the mainly drafted in the 3rd round, right?
Yeah, it seemed like a lot of folks end of the 2nd, beginning of the 3rd. He was a monster last year, and
beast mode.
So here's what I'm going to do, Vince, and this is my suggestion. I think that you and I may actually want to come back and dedicate half of a show to the Indiana Pacers in the next couple of weeks. You game?
I'm definitely game for that. 100%. Yeah, I honestly can't even put my finger on this team right now, and I haven't even started on this team.
And it's not worth rushing through it either. There's so much going on. I think it deserves a better microscope than what we could give it in what for us is usually about 6 to 7 minutes per team on these shows. And that's more of a 15 to 20 minute conversation. So we're coming back to it. We'll have an Indiana Pacers only show. Well, maybe half again. That'll be coming up in the next couple of weeks.
And I think another thing too that another reason why I'm having such a hard time with this, and I think Dan, you might agree with me, is that they're building a small ball lineup type of team, but I with the new coach of Nate McMillan there, I don't know if that's really again that's where I'm having a lot of my thoughts and where I'm kind of drawing my confusion with how I'm looking at this roster from a fantasy perspective. We only know that Paul George is going to be effective. I think Miles Turner has talent, but I'm with you. Let's just come back maybe in a couple weeks or so and just really look at this team. We'll talk about it a little bit off air and see if we can come up with something good for you guys, because I would hate to rush through this, like you said.
Yeah, we're going to CVS. We're purchasing the finest toothed comb that they have available, and we're coming back to Indiana in a week or two. So stay tuned on that one. Detroit basketball, Vince. This is another team where very little changed. So year over year, any real differences to point out? I don't think so.
No, they stayed the exact same.
They did get John Lure.
What was that?
They did sign John Lure and Boban Marjanovic, but anyway, go ahead.
I like John Lure, though. I will say that. I think John Lure was a nice piece to this team, but I mean, he's going to be right where he was, basically finishing minimal minutes behind guys like Tobias Harris and Marcus Morris. I guess that can be a question that we bring up after seeing the production that they were able to do, Dan, with Marcus Morris and Tobias Harris together, and what they did in the playoffs, attacking a guy like Kevin Love. Do you think their value goes up a little bit, or do you think one of them actually has a good year, one of them has bad, or do you kind of think they hurt one another from a fantasy perspective?
I think they'll both be okay. Marcus Morris had a nice year last year, but his fantasy stat set is not that impressive. I think he's going to be a guy that gets drafted, and I think people don't really realize how little he does for them. Between those two guys, I would lean more towards Tobias Harris. I like his stat set more. I like his defensive numbers a little bit more, and I think he fits in pretty well. But, I mean, Detroit's kind of an interesting bird in that you can just go back and look at what this team did in say February, March, and you got a pretty good idea of where these guys are going in your draft. So if that's the way you're planning for it, stick with it. If you've got a need for what they bring to the table, then draft them. This is a simple one. Detroit's a very binary drafting team. Do you need Andre Drummond, and are you okay with his terrible free throws? Fine. I'm not, by the way. Do you need scoring? Okay, Marcus Morris can get you that. Do you need Tobias Harris, who can get you some points, good percentages, some rebounding, some steals, some threes? All right, he's worth drafting. Do you need threes and steals exclusively? KCP, worth drafting. Do you need points and assists? Reggie Jackson, worth drafting. But there's no one guy on this Detroit team that's going to be able to carry your team. They're all mid-round guys. Again, maybe with the exception of Andre Drummond, but that is going to be contingent on how you build your fantasy team. So that's my take on Detroit. A whole bunch of mid-round guys, and pick them up if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. The only player that I think we kind of left out and he got paid over the offseason after what he did for Philadelphia last year, and that's Ish Smith off the bench.
Yeah,
he's definitely not gonna be the guy he was when he was the starter for Philly. But
exactly.
I still like if you want to, like you said, if you're just naming off things, if you want assists at the end of your draft, he's probably going to see right around 20, 23 minutes a game. He'd probably get you 5-6 assists with a steal or two, but that's really about it. I mean, he doesn't shoot the greatest percentages either, so there's that. And then Stanley Johnson was the other guy that we didn't even talk about, and maybe it's just because I'm a fan of Stanley Johnson, but I hope that he gets the opportunity to show what he's really all about and starts to see his minute production or his minutes start to go up, so we can possibly see that production start to build up as well. So he's on my radar.
There's nothing wrong with you being a fan of Stanley Johnson. I just don't think I don't think he is going to be able to see enough minutes to be relevant unless somebody gets hurt. There's just the shooting guard spot. There's a roadblock. Small forward. There's a roadblock. Any place that they could reasonably try to deploy him, there are other bodies that also deserve minutes there. So maybe he sees 16 to 18 minutes a game off the bench, but that is not nearly enough to warrant being in discussion in fantasy drafts. So
completely agree.
I think that's really your breakdown of Detroit. It's a pretty simple team from a fantasy perspective. You know where these guys are going to get drafted, so slot them in. If you need them, go get them. If you don't worry about it. Easy enough. How about Milwaukee, Vince? This is another team that didn't change a whole lot, but I do still have some questions about them. And my biggest question with Milwaukee is not the fact that they signed Mirza Teletovic as someone that can actually step outside and shoot a little bit. I got to know what's going on at the center position with this team. They have 3 competent centers on the Milwaukee roster and not enough minutes for any of them.
Yeah, that's why they're trying to look to move Greg Monroe. I don't know how many times we've seen it already in this offseason, but Mark Stein of ESPN.com keeps being able to be a faithful tweeter for the Sacramento Kings and Milwaukee, reminding the NBA that Greg Monroe and Rudy Gay are on the trading block for these teams. So there's that. But yeah, I think that we're going to see a Greg Monroe move, I think, right before the season begins. And honestly, if he does get moved, I hope John Henson gets the opportunity to be something, because
good Lord, I hope you're right.
He gets the blocks. He shoots nice percentages. He gets rebounds. He just can't hit free throws. But guess what?
He doesn't take very many.
Anybody else center in the league.
Yeah, and he doesn't take very many. He's not shooting enough to really hurt you. He is a block monster, and I was a huge proponent of John Henson when Aaron and I were doing the regular season show back in March. I was all over John as a great pickup down the stretch, a guy that could come in and in 2 weeks get you 15 to 20 blocks. I mean, these were game-changing numbers. This is how you jump people in your Roto League down the stretch. But, yeah, somebody's going to have to get moved because right now there just aren't enough minutes to go around at the big man spot. And we will, of course, come back to this if somebody does get moved on the Milwaukee side. But, Vince, how good did Giannis Antetokounmpo get last year? I mean, how good was he towards the end of the season? I want to read off some numbers if you'll indulge me here for a moment.
Oh, I'm ready.
This is the full season numbers, by the way. This is despite the fact that he got off to a decent start, but didn't explode until late in the year. And when all was said and done, Antetokounmpo, 51% from the field, 72% at the free throw line. Not perfect, but that's not a number that's going to hurt you. 17 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, 1.2 steals, 1.4 blocks, and the only thing he didn't do was hit the 3. This is a guy that is a fantasy monster. Everybody knew it was going to happen. We just weren't sure exactly when the pieces would fall into place. They fell into place. He's not a surprise anymore, and if you want him, you're going to have to grab him early because he ended the year as a top 30 guy. In fact, I think because he was pretty darn durable, he may have even ended the year as a top 20 guy. I don't know that I could use a second-round pick on him, but darn it, Vince, I would use a third-round pick on him.
I'm reaching. I'm saying late second round.
Yeah, and I don't think you're crazy for saying it either. I mean, if you really want him, you're going to have to go and get him because people are looking at him. He's not a value play. That's not what you're getting with this guy, but you're picking up somebody that I think you can be pretty confident in. He just does everything.
And from what I've been hearing all about Giannis Antetokounmpo this offseason is he is working on that jumper, and he's working on it hard so he can stretch out that floor as well and be a threat all over that floor.
Well, that's superstar stuff. If he starts hitting the jumper, that's superstar stuff.
I think, a lot of people are going to want to hope that he slides to the third, but if you want him, I don't think it's a risk to take him in that second round. I really don't.
All right, here's one more guy, by the way, Vince. I apologize for cutting you off. Chris Middleton. I mean, we're talking about a Milwaukee team that has 2 very, very good players on the wings. Middleton ended last year because of his durability as a top 30 guy. By average, by the way, he was number 42, but playing in every game or close to every game goes a long way in a rotisserie league. And Middleton, 18 points, 4 boards, 4 assists, 1.7 steals, and almost 2 threes per game. And check out this one. He's an 89% free throw shooter on 4 per game. Chris Middleton's another guy that's not going to slip the way he did last year. So I guess the question, Vince, that I really want to know is not so much whether or not these are guys that we like. I think everybody likes them. But how you told me you'd even consider the second round for Antetokounmpo. Would you consider the 4th round for Chris Middleton, or is he a guy that where you just hope that he falls to the 5th and you take him there?
I'm going to be the opposite of what I was for Giannis. I am going to hope that he slides to the 5th round, and I think that's fair to say, just because, I want to see consistency from his jump shot, and he was kind of a surprise for a lot of people getting Chris Middleton to see what he was able to do. So he's young. I want to see that he can do it consistently going from one season to the next. But still at the same time, I'm definitely looking for him on my draft. So I'm saying 5th round for him for sure.
One more big question with Milwaukee. We've gone over the center spot. We've looked at the wings. But have we? Does Giannis Antetokounmpo end up seeing the bulk of his minutes at point guard? And does Michael Carter-Williams fall off the face of the earth? Is that a possibility this year? Because for me, Vince, I want nothing to do with Michael Carter-Williams. He's a someone else's headache for me. But is it possible that he's not even just a headache and he's just a non-factor?
I don't like Michael Carter-Williams either. And on top of that, not only do I think Giannis hurts him, I think the acquisition of Matthew Dellavedova hurts him as well. And I think the reason why they brought in Dellavedova is, 1, he's a better defender around the perimeter, and 2, he's going to be able to do what he was doing for Cleveland, and that's throw up lobs.
Oh, that shot. Oh, that
Giannis,
shot is disgusting.
Jabari, Chris Middleton, all those guys.
That floater, by the way, is just the most sickening thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
But it works.
He's gonna be a pain in the butt for every other person except for his teammates. And I think he's a good fit for Milwaukee. He's definitely not a starter caliber player, but I think that Michael Carter Williams is almost someone that I'm not even touching. Got the stamp.
Got to stamp him. Totally on board with that usage of our rubber stamp. One more guy. I lied. I had one more question on this team. Does Mirza Deledovic see enough minutes to be relevant? Because, boy, can that guy gun when he's on the floor.
He'll be a bench guy. I think, it'll be him and Henson if Greg Monroe doesn't get moved. And he's definitely going to throw the ball through him as much as he can. But, yeah, I'm not a huge fan of Deledovic, to be perfectly honest with you. Not even when he was with Brooklyn. I mean, he had nice games. With Phoenix. He had nice games, but I wasn't really that big on him. I was more of a fan of John Lure and hoping that he was going to get minutes. He plays no defense, so.
Yeah, he's a lightning in a bottle kind of guy, and maybe he's a guy that we also reassess if one of those big men gets moved on the Milwaukee Bucks side. Vince, I'm actually feeling pretty satisfied with our look at this Central Division. Sans Indiana. Did I miss anything?
No, I think we're not giving enough love to Jabari Parker. I think he's going to be nice this season. I don't think you're expecting too much or too little from him. I think he had a very steady season. I want him to stay steady and keep on improving his game. I keep on mentioning fans of players that I am. I'm a fan of Jabari Parker, and I think he can become a very relevant fantasy player throughout the season, especially if you're getting him at the mid to late part of your draft. So keep him on your radar.
Yeah. My fear with the Jabari Parker is that you're going to see somebody draft him on name again. He was a top 100 guy because he played every night, but by average, he really was not all that awesome for fantasy teams. He doesn't assist. He's a scorer, and that's pretty much it. Doesn't shoot the three. Doesn't play a ton of defense. He looked a little bit sluggish coming off the injury last year, so maybe there is a chance that the defensive numbers improve as his legs round into shape and he's able to kind of drop a couple of those extra pounds going into this coming season. But he's not a guy I'm eyeballing. He's an end-of-the-draft guy. If somehow I'm in a league where everybody else doesn't want him either, then yeah, I mean, if you got him towards the tail end of a draft, then he's a great value. He's a guy that you could probably flip for a specialist at some point along the way, but he's not a guy worth targeting.
Yeah, no, like I said, he's at the end of your draft. I mean, with only 14 points, 5 rebounds, not even 2 assists, 1.7, 0.4 blocks, 0.9 steals. I mean, those are, I guess, again, something that you'd want at the end of your draft. 49.3% from the field and only 25.7 from three-point range, getting you getting you 0.1 threes per game. So,
yeah. He's a guy that's easy to root for, but not a guy that's easy to own in a fantasy draft. Simple enough.
Fan.
Well, we've got but one division left, the Atlantic. That'll be coming up next week, and then we'll circle back, maybe take a look at the Indiana Pacers. And you know what? All of a sudden, by the end of next week, Vince, we're going to be in August. Can you believe that?
Oh my goodness. Guess what, Dan? The fantasy season's coming up closer and closer.
We're really only a couple months away at that point, which is somewhat mind-boggling because I feel like we just wrapped up the playoffs, and that's why the NBA is a year-long league. So, folks, thanks again for listening. This is Fantasy NBA Today. I'm Dan Bespris. He's Vince Miracle. On Twitter, he is at VM Center. I am at Dan Bespris. The website Twitter feed is at HoopBallTweets. You can check us out on YouTube, on iTunes. I believe you said, Vince, on Android, it's Double Pod. Is that right?
Yep, and Double Pod is DOUBLEPOD, all one word. Look it up. It's in your app store.
Double your pod, double your fun. For Vince Miracle, I'm Dan Bespris. Have a wonderful weekend. Back at you with the Atlantic Division next week. So long, everybody.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.